So welcome everybody to episode 3, season 3 of our Shoe and Cocoa podcast. And in this episode, I'll be introducing Rupert Shaw, the pre-construction and sales director of Epiphany, to the show. We'll be covering some interesting topics, specifically with regards to design and dump. We'll be talking about how labour markets and materials markets have been affected most recently by COVID and the challenges we've all faced in the last 6 months. We'll be talking about some landmark growth challenges for the business and some interesting ways that they've approached it and they've tackled it. They found success through collaboration, partnership, non-confrontation, and I think you'll find this an interesting one. Welcome, Rupert.
Thank you, Tony. Nice to be here.
Yeah, my pleasure. My pleasure. Nice to see you. So look, in a second, Rupert, I'm going to hand over to you to explain to some of our viewers a little bit about Epiphany, because for me, Epiphany is probably one of London's best kept secrets. This is a plug for you. We're obviously a big endorser of Epiphany because you fitted out our offices.
You are indeed. Yes, you're sitting in an Epiphany product. So we need to do this on video, don't we?
Oh, yeah, we do. We need like a 360 and a walkthrough. So yeah, very pleased and thank you to Steve and all of the guys. I think you've done a great job and we're very, very pleased. So that's a good kickoff for you. But why don't you tell the rest of the viewers a little bit about Epiphany, some of your USPs, and a little bit about the story and the journey?
Well, story of the journey is it's basically two guys, a young guy and a guy sort of my age, so early 50s, which is still young.
Youngish.
And they've got together, and you've got a numbers man and you've got a construction man. And they gel really well together, and they've just recognised a little bit of the gap in the market. And that gap in the market is one on client side, based on quick start, quick turnaround, and teaming up with clients, and very much on the other side with the supply chain. When you're a Epiphany size contractor, and Epiphany will be £20 million contractor next year, you can't use a stick. You have to have a carrot, and they partner and they have the trust of their supply chain, and it's just a really nice way to work. There's not 18-page purchase orders. There's a level of trust between team players at Epiphany, but that only works up to a certain scale. It's not scalable en masse, Tony, but if you can do it up to sort of 20-25 million pounds, I think it's a really nice way to build.
Yeah, and I think it's fair to say you're obviously responsible for the front end, and you've come in to take, Dave and Darren's business to the next level, both in terms of turnover and product and some of those key client relationships that you've got, right? But I think it would be a good, just as a bit of a plug, to talk about some of the recent wins. I was really impressed when you talked to me about the repeat business. So you talked about partnerships, and this can be seen in projects like 85 London Wall with LaSalle Investment Management. Tell us a bit about that, Rupert.
Yeah, very much so. LaSalle are a key client for us now. And we've got a model for them on the Cat A and the Cat A Plus in terms of plug and play that really works. We know what kind of style they want, and we know what kind of cost point it needs to be. And I think if you're a business our size and you tender literally everything, it's very hard to get a return. If you can start getting some repeat business and building some client relationships, you can basically educate your supply chain and build up your profitability a little bit. And also speed. A lot of it now is about speed to market. And there's a time involved in detailed tendering. Things go through a tender process, but if you know what ticks boxes in terms of style and value engineering and what's really important to a client, you can make it work better.
Yeah, setting out expectation and making sure that you reach that. Because in terms of time windows, one of the things that a lot of our clients have been talking about, and in fact, one of our previous podcasts, is the current challenge in terms of materials prices, in terms of labour prices, the inflation, and as a result, quotes becoming redundant within a space of weeks.
It's a real pressure point for the industry at the moment. I mean, look, you used to submit a tender and you fix your costs for 12 to 16 weeks. We now submit our costs and fix them for 4 weeks. And to be honest, I'm nervous at that. I mean, if you take a typical product, let's say, I don't know, raised access flooring. I mean, raised access flooring has probably been, let's say, circa 35 quid for the last 10, 15 years. Within the last couple of months, it's gone from 47 to 49. So it's already had a massive jump.
Yeah.
And I can't see why it continues to climb. I can see that there maybe has been a problem with, COVID causing factories to close, etc. But I think we're now we're in a near normal situation again now, where that should have started to correct itself. And what we're seeing is it hasn't corrected itself with pricing. It's still extremely volatile. And it is on the labour front as well. But it has to end at some point. It can't continually go on like it is. Or else I think, people are going to have real problems in having trust in contractors to build out things.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I think I think we said earlier, in terms of, consultants trying to cost plan, how do you cost plan and put any sort of certainty to it if things carry on the way they're going? And on top of that, again, as you've said, for me, I can understand the blip in terms of commodities prices and fabricated goods. I can understand that inventories were pretty much at zero, 6 months ago. And as a result, you've still got a delay in production and a massive increase in demand, which has obviously led to inflation going through the roof. But again, as you've said, as those factories have adjusted in terms of production timing changes, there's a lot of factories, both in the UK and mainland Europe, now working 24 hours in shifts to try and get around COVID challenges. You would have expected, certainly by Q1 next year, for that to feed through to a reduction in prices.
Yeah, there's no sign of that, is there? And you just worry, don't you? Because a lot of these things relate back to raw materials, such as steel and stuff. And then you start to worry about protectionism coming in, like we know in the car industry with chips and China holding back on the issue of chips, and you think, well, hang on, this is happening with steel, this production being deliberately held back. Yeah. Because it's difficult to imagine, there hasn't been a 2 or 3-fold demand plasterboard. Why is a 2 or 3-fold and continuing increase in that price? It doesn't make sense, and that leads you to think, hang on, are companies maximising their position on this, and is some of it being driven for profitability? I don't know, but logic seems to be getting defied at the moment, doesn't it?
Well, yeah, and then you start to wonder whether or not there's a level of cartelisation going on, with major manufacturers in terms of price fixing. And you'd hope not, and you'd hope that a level of competition ensures that there's a return. Interestingly, US lumber prices have definitely started to reduce. So whether or not that's reflective in Europe, who knows? But
yeah, I mean, you would hope, certainly with timber, which is a raw material, which is, quicker to distribute, that being the case. I think on the protectionism thing, we've got the CMA, haven't we? We've got good bodies around us to make sure that doesn't go on. I think it's probably more a case of X amount of materials coming from X amount of different places. and logistics probably play a part in it as well. You know, that's probably, you know, inflating the price of materials as well.
Yeah, yeah. Border control issues, as we've had, you know, as we've been reading about, certainly a UK border control areas.
Yeah.
But putting a pin in that, there's some other things that we discussed, which I thought were really quite interesting, and other challenges for the industry. Certainly in terms of evolution and things that you've seen change over the last 5, 10, 15 years. We talked about the responsibility for design and the reflection in terms of choice of contract and contract amendments, etc. Talk to us more about what you've seen and what you predict in terms of contractors' liability for design.
So I suppose when I first came in the industry, 20 years ago, you know, the JCT D&B was very, very rarely used in commercial fit out. You know, now everything is D&B, and by that I don't mean that traditional contractors aren't doing D&B. Everything is more or less design and build, design and done, whatever you want to call it, where the contractor takes on all the risk. So that's a significant change. And I think also, you know, very much architects used to be at the you know, the top of the tree. And now in terms of contractor selection, it's probably less important. And it's probably more, you know, PMs and QSs that hold the power. But I think, you know, contractors, we're very bad at a body. If you think a client goes into contract with the contractor, he doesn't go into contract with the QS, the PM, or the architect. And I think, you know, we've as a body, we've taken on, you know, too much design and build with ridiculous amendments. And I think, you know, as a body, we need to look at that. And there's no harm in you know, trying to be a little bit more collective on that, I don't think. But my final point on that is I just think, you know, maybe it's come full circle. I think now, with everything over the last sort of 5 years, particularly being on a design and build basis, it has brought actually clients and contractors maybe a little bit closer, because, you know, inevitably, if everything is under the contractor's appointment and under the contractor's writ, the contractor will have greater discussion with the client and actually start to get closer to the client. So, you know, you could argue long term, but where's it going in terms of, you know, earlier contractor involvement? It's always fascinated me when I started in the industry that, you know, probably 85% of the construction process is done by the contractor during the build. I don't know, 15, 20% is done by design and surveying prior to the build. And yet the contractor is brought in very late in the process. And I think, you know, going forward, because of so much D&B, the contractors inevitably are going to start getting involved earlier. And I'm talking about, particularly in our area of fit out, not so much major construction where that's already been undertaken. So yeah, I think, you know, we're very bad as a group. We need to really try and establish, you know, a set of amendments which is reasonable. And it's funny, isn't it? The JCT, Joint Contracts Tribunal, you know, it's a body of RICS, RIBA, you know, CITB or CIOB. They don't sit on that board. You know, there's no contractor involvement. And I think going forward, that probably needs to be looked at as well. But I'm probably living in Halo land, aren't I?
Yeah, but the ideal, unicorn land. From what we're gleaning in terms of clients, there's definitely a view that procurement is having to change. Speed of procurement is having to change, and therefore the relationship between consultant, client, and contractor is having to evolve and become closer. Because if it takes too long, your price is out of whack. If it takes too long, you certainly won't get a fixed price. And actually, what we're starting to see more of is a return to two-stage and a return to cost plus, basically because often or at times there is no alternative. And one thing you said that I thought was really interesting before we came on air was that as contractors, we shouldn't be worried about or shouldn't feel as if making a profit and a healthy profit is a bad thing, you know?
It's strange, isn't it? I think, does it just go back to sort of like, I don't know, the contractor is ripping me off type scenario. You assume that if you're engaging with a builder or a contractor, you're getting ripped off. And I think those days are so far gone. I just think our industry is much more closely governed, it's much more professional. And actually look at the profitabilities of contracting companies. They're not obscene.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, profit shouldn't be a dirty word. And also the last thing, a client team or contractor wants is a contractor to go pop. So, we can't, I think, we're very bad as contractors if we think the market is changing, adjusting our tender settlement rates. And it kind of spirals very quickly. And that's a dangerous game. I just think, you're always kind of thinking, oh, I wonder what, the other contractors going in at, et cetera, et cetera. And again, the nice thing at being, at a company like Epiphany is you don't have to worry about, feeding that machine. You're not chasing turnover. You can, afford, have the luxury of saying, actually, we're going to cut our cloth to suit. Yeah. And we're actually not going to get into tender madness. I mean, I'm talking about during the peak of COVID now where, margins will just get driven down and down. I think they're actually better now.
Yeah, I agree. And as we've said, demand and supply is reflective of that in terms of margin and risk.
And the other key thing there, Tony, is how you treat your supply chain. And I've worked for big companies and small companies, and as I say, contractors don't actually build anything. Our supply chain builds it, and you can treat supply chain in two ways. You can have a carrot and a stick, and dare I say it, the bigger contractors probably just naturally lean towards a stick because they've got so much buying power. With us, it really is about partnering and relationships, and we don't really pull from a massive database of subcontractors. We use the same 2 or 3 electrical companies, 2 or 3 mechanical companies, petitioning companies, etc. This means you get more repeat business as a subcontractor, and actually it means, I think they take a little bit more ownership because, they're not just going to work for us and then not work for us for another 3 months. So, they know through trust if nothing else that that is the way it is going to work.
I think it's a really interesting point. You've constantly got that balance, haven't you, in terms of I need to provide value. I need to ensure that my supply chain has a level of interrogation. But if I keep chopping my supply chain or adding to it, I don't get the value out of those relationships and the long-term synergies. And it's about striking that balance. Yeah. And actually, for me, a really interesting story this week. New project director contacts us looking for us to use him as agent. And one of his key issues, and he currently works for a tier 1 fit-out contractor. And one of his key issues was he said, look, Tony, I don't understand it. He said, of the last 4 projects I've had, I've chopped and changed my supply chain purely based on price, right? And I don't have the ability at all to bring teams of people from one to another that work coherently and effectively. And that's one of his key reasons for looking for a new job. The irony was when we started interrogating some of these supply chain choices, they weren't on paper ridiculous choices. It wasn't as if his commercial team had gone to, Joe and his mate in his van. They'd made some reasonable choices, but all of those choices lacked any sort of synergy. At which point you go, if we do fast track programs, surely that trust and that synergy and those human relationships are key to delivering that program.
Yeah, they are. And that's a dangerous game if you are moving your supply chain all the time, because when your back's against the wall, and we all get tough jobs from time to time, you depend on them. And if you're moving them around too much, that's too difficult. As you say, you have to get a balance. You need to be competitive. I think working in precon as well now, more than construction side, there's in fit out, there's a bit of a disconnect. Precon, if you win the job, you do a handover to delivery, and then sometimes delivery will completely switch the people who have estimated it, and that's soul destroying for a subcontractor who's put in a lot of effort. And the nice thing about Epiphany, again, it's probably size and scale of contractors and close working team is you try and join it across, so you don't rebuy. It's not 100% of the time, but certainly it sounds like the position of that project director in a tier one is probably being driven to rebuy, probably by pressure on margin. And yeah, you'll then slightly more risk. I mean, the tier one would argue, well, hang on, we have a purchase order, it's a compliant bid, those are the terms and conditions, it was accepted, do your job. You can do that if you're a big operator. You can't do it if you're an Epiphany. The relationship is key.
And I think that's the thing, isn't it? In terms of your success as a Tiger business, going from 0 to 15 million this year, as London's best kept secret, right? And as a client, if I was saying why, it's that level of flexibility and agility. Through, not that we had an extensive design evolution process at all, but where there were changes, we didn't get hit for them hard. There was a level of reason about it. We had material selection changes part way through. Again, we didn't get clobbered. It was all pretty reasonable. So I think you're right. It's that approach that isn't adversarial, and it runs from client through consultant, through principal contractor and supply chain, and you're clearly doing something right.
Yeah, the one thing that's nice about construction, isn't it, is people can still start their own construction business. It's still relatively easy to do. It's not as easy as it was, but and if you do it well and you're successful, you build actually quite quickly. And in a sort of unit which is say 20-25 million pounds, which is where we're heading, as a team you can still touch everybody and you still know everybody's name. When you go above that figure to sort of 75 million, there's a whole tier of management that then distracts from that.
Yeah.
So it's very difficult to go from 20 to 35. You almost have to do a jump from 25 to 50. But also, I think the problem for Epiphany will not be, being a 25 million pound business unit. The problem will be, how do you cap it there? And, I've been in this situation before. It's very difficult when you've got a client who's giving you a 2 million pound job. He said, that was really well. I want you now to do this 7.5 million pound job. Say no. And again, contractors, we're very bad at self-discipline. But, I think Dave and Darren have really got their head screwed on with this. They know where they want to be. And I think a lot of people go in contracting and they don't know where they want to be. They just know they want to have a great contracting business and grow. And, having that end plan, I think will keep the guys in check.
I agree. And I was on the phone to Dave a couple of months ago, and I think you've hit the nail on the head. When I talked to him about heavy refurbishment, when I talked to him about type and scale of work, he was very clear. He said, when we risk profile, when we look at what we take on, we're absolutely clear about it. And we're quite happy to say no. We're quite happy to say to a client or a consultant, look, it's just not for us. If we do perform for you, if we tender for you, we're going to give it both barrels. But actually, we're quite happy to turn around and say no.
Yeah.
And actually, I think one of the things our industry is guilty of, or certainly as contractors, is not saying no enough and feeling as if it's a bad thing.
I think you're right. And I think it also ties back in, I mean, if you look at Dave and, the PMs and CMs and the delivery team that Darren and Dave have brought on, they've all got that refurbishment experience and they've all got that structural experience. But, the amendments with JCT, D&B now, you've got to be so careful. It can go wrong so easily, and just put businesses to bed. I think when you've worked maybe for larger companies, as Dave and Darren have, and you've been in those situations under those form of contracts, doing heavy refurb for developers who basically just want to, pay lowest possible cost against contractor, you think, actually, this is a pretty tough world to be in.
Yeah.
And as a business model, do you really want to go there?
And for me, if you do go there, you've got to again have the right risk profile. You've got to have the right staff. You've got to have the right supply chain. You've got to have the ability to say no. And for me, it's about the type of client. If you've got freeholders who aren't just interested in lowest common denominator to flip, right? Develop to flip, get it through, sign off, get our warranties, get it let and get rid of the building. If you can go with the landed estates of this world, if you can go with landlords or owner occupiers with a long-term approach to their asset, then you're all right. I think if you don't and you look at the alternative, I think that's where you end up with a lot of problems.
Yeah, very much so. And I think also, I think at Epiphany, we're really having a lot of fun and we're not compromising by that. I think you look at our health and safety record, it's better than most sort of main contractors, but we're having a lot of fun in what we're doing. And I think as a team, it would take us away from actually enjoying that construction element, and we'd end up, having to, write the letters and becoming that little bit of an aggressive beast that, we've all been there, and we don't really want to go back to actually at the moment. So, we're really enjoying just building good stuff, which you're sitting in.
That's the thing. It's the freshness, the tiger business. It's exciting times, and I hope certainly for the business that carries on for as long as you can keep that momentum going.
Yeah, I think, my job is to broaden the client base a little bit, which is going definitely in the right direction. As I say, I think, in the following year, the question will be, right, okay, how do we keep this nicheness about us, this freshness about us? But that's a nice problem to have, hey?
It is a nice problem to have. And we wish you the best. We wish you the best with it, Rupert. So look, I'm going to wrap this up by saying thank you, Rupert Shaw. Thank you for your time. Good luck to Epiphany on the next 12 months and beyond. Thank you, and have a good weekend.
Great. Thanks, Tony, and you.
Pleasure. Thanks, Rupert.